Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Opinion Machine. My name is Killjoy, and today I am talking about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and how this game has made me a fan of the Zelda series. So, as you know, the Switch has been out a few weeks now, we're coming up to April, but throughout most of the month I have been playing Breath of the Wild quite a lot. We're talking about 70 hours plus. I've now completed the game and I'm going back through and just doing the other content and things that I want to do now. Now I'm ready to talk about this topic, which is literally like how this has turned me into a big fan of the series rather than just someone who had played the games. So to give you some kind of perspective on my experience with the Zelda series, I'll just tell you about the games that I've played first and my thoughts and feelings about those and how this is different from those games. And I want to talk about a lot about the game. Heads up, I'm going to try and avoid any big spoilers. I don't want to talk about spoilers. I don't want people to who have not played this game have this ruined for them. So when I talk about story, it'll be very, very loose. I don't want to talk about too much about other things in too much detail. Again, like, I don't want to spoil for people who don't want to have the game spoiled for them. So yeah, so my history with the Zelda series was simply that I played like the first game, the second game, a lot of the top-down ones, so Link to the Past, A Link's Awakening, Link Between Worlds, and then the 3D ones I played Wind Waker HD, and Ocarina of Time. Other than that, I've not really had a huge amount of time with the series. Now, I've never been overly good at the series, especially the 3D ones. With Ocarina of Time, I only ever got to Jabu Jabu's Belly, which is one of the dungeons quite early on in the game. And it was a game that didn't really grab me at the time. I didn't play it when it came out on the N64, I played it a bit later than that, and I wasn't really that into it. Wind Waker was an even worse experience. I couldn't even get my sword back when you get launched into the Forsaken Fortress, so I played that for about an hour and a half. It wasn't until Wind Waker HD came out that I actually got a lot further into the game. With the top-down Zelda games like Link's Awakening, I got pretty far into. Link Between Worlds I completed, Link to the Past I got so far into it, and also Oracle of Seasons, which I played a bit of. Now, up to this point, before Breath of the Wild came out, I had enjoyed these games that I'd played, more so the top-down ones. I liked that perspective, I thought that worked well, I liked the games. But I was never a huge fan of the series. For me, Nintendo is like, I love the Super Mario Brothers series, I love the Smash series, I like a lot of their other games, but Zelda was never really one of the ones that was up there for me. Like, it was a good series and I respected it because it had done really well, but it was never something that was really on my radar when games came out. Last E3, I remember they were going to show off literally nothing but Zelda, and at this point I was like, oh, I didn't want to see an entire E3 about Zelda, and it ended up not being that way. But because of that decision that Nintendo made, I got to see so much gameplay of the first area for Breath of the Wild that it completely sold me on the game. This wasn't a standard sort of Zelda. Even though it felt like Zelda and looked like Zelda, this wasn't the standard Zelda. So then I got excited about it. So when they announced it was like launched with the Switch on the first day, I was like, right, that's the game I'm gonna buy with this new system. Right off the start, I just fell in love with the game. So I want to go through a bunch of different areas of the game, things that personally I enjoyed. I'm not going to be able to cover everything. I'm sure I'll forget things as well, but I feel like I can give you some kind of insight to how much joy this game brought to me. And the big thing to remember about Breath of the Wild is it gives you the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I like this game so much. So first off, I want to talk about the exploration in this game. This game is as non-linear as it comes. You don't have to do anything in order. You can do things in your own order, in your own time, when you want to, if you feel like going to an area, whatever. You can do whatever you want straight off the bat. So for me, when I started the game, I just wanted to see a lot of the world. I wasn't really focused on going to the dungeons and, thinking late game. I was very much a case of I would see towers or shrines, which are two major things in the game for me, and I was wanting to do that sort of stuff. I was exploring. If I couldn't get somewhere to start with, I was like, well, how do I get up there? Figuring that out, coming back to things later. Just enjoying the experience of running around, seeing things. I was never bored because I would stumble across things in the world that I wouldn't expect, or I'd run into difficult combat situations, or I'd try and find these cool areas to just explore and see and find secrets. And that was one of the major reasons why this game, I literally fell in love with it, because I was always doing things at my own pace when I wanted to. If I wanted to get into lots of combat, I could find it. There was never a huge dip in combat areas. If I didn't want to get in combat, I could avoid it. I could run past things, I could sneak past things, just avoid those areas altogether. So that side of the exploration was a lot of fun. You know, I could see something on the world, I could look on the map and go, I want to go there. And I would run to an area and just climb, or just try and find a way into a certain area, or just see what was there. Because each part of the map, you know, as you're running around the map, you're coming across really cool areas that are very different to other areas on the map. Each place has its own character, and that's something which is really good about Hyrule as a whole in this game. It has a lot of character to it. There's lots of wildlife. It feels like there is people living in this world, as well as the creatures and the other things that inhabit it, which is wonderful when you're running around and you see, you know, one minute you're in a town or a village, and next thing you're out in the middle of some crazy place with like full of enemies. And that was non-stop for me. Like, there were times where I wanted it, you know, I could walk across a field and look, see what was out in front of me, and just have a nice walk or ride a horse or something, and that was wonderful too, because it would be like a nice little break from the stuff that was going on in the world. But it gave me enough to know that if I wanted something specific, I could find that very easily. Yeah, so another thing is, with exploration, there obviously in this game you have certain areas that you can't access straight away, usually via temperature. The game does a good job of giving you multiple answers to do these certain things. So like, to enter a cold area, you'd need to find clothes that warm you up, but you don't have to do that. You can find elixirs or make elixirs that would help you, that would limited time, but they would let you enter an area that you otherwise couldn't be in if you didn't have the right clothing, which I really liked. I thought that was a great idea, because it means you can literally go, if you've got the right ingredients and you know what you're doing, you can go anywhere on the map for any amount of time. If not, you save up your money, you buy the clothing, and then you don't have to worry about it. So, and also you can find items like that, like the clothing, in some parts of the world without buying it. There are certain things that you can find that are hidden away. So if you're lucky enough to stumble upon those things and searching for those things, you can get those, and that lets you tackle it straight away much quicker. And I think that was something that was really prominent in this game, was that every puzzle, every situation can be tackled in about, you know, between 2 to 4 or 5 different ways. It was enjoyable to see myself play for it, but also watch Mark as well, who's currently playing for it, doing things completely differently and thinking in his own way versus the way I thought about things. Some things I would come across and work it out straight away, some things he wouldn't. But then he would also do things that I didn't even think of. And that is also what I love about it, is that choice of let me do things and I want in my own way. Like I said, you have the freedom to do what you want when you want. Going more into the materials side, this is something that I actually like. This game is made up of Zelda, the Spirit of Zelda, almost like the open world games like Skyrim formula, and then a bit of the survival elements from like Minecraft and some of the other lots of survival games you get on the PC. But not too far in any one direction. It always feels like Zelda. But what's good about this is the material side of it. Being able to forage for food and materials, and to be able to combine things in cooking them or using them to create things that are useful to you. But it never goes too far, like it feels too complex. Like, to cook something, you can have a maximum of 5 items, and you can just choose the items you want, chuck them in a pot, and see what happens. And then you get given a new item, whether it's a good combination or a bad combination, or if you want to make elixirs that give you little buffs, you can do that as well. Or if you just need like wood for fires in this, you can just carry that around. And the good thing is your inventory space for those items, those materials, is never limited. You can carry as much as you want, as far as I'm aware, which is great. So you can have times where you might want to just a short time away from the combat and the puzzles, and you might spend some time in a town and just cook loads of meals, combining all sorts of different food. Doing that, and also the foraging side of it, going out in the field and looking for rocks or that you can smash, or cutting down a tree, or finding said weapons and armor and stuff hidden away, as well as collecting herbs and things like that. You know, it's such a fun experience to be able to, as you're running somewhere, be constantly sidetracked, being like, oh, I can actually use some of these for this. And that was really fun when I would stop after a few hours play to just cook some stuff and realize all these materials I got from just being out in the field, from different situations, picking different things up, and not realizing that I'd actually accumulated so much stuff. Another big thing for me personally, and this is one of the reasons why the game, I think, has turned me into such a fan, is the exploration for the shrines and for the towers that are in the game. Now, the way that shrines work is basically they act as fast travel points around the map, but they also act as miniature puzzles away from the main game. When you enter one, you basically get one of 3 different types. You get one that you do a challenge in the overworld, you enter it, you get given a reward, you don't have to do something in it. You get ones that require you to have a combat trial, and then ones that require you to figure out a puzzle. And the amount, there's 120 in the game, and the amount of variety that I came across was astonishing. It's probably some of the best puzzles I've ever done in the game. Now, I'm not very good at puzzles, I'm not very good at puzzle games. I never felt like I entered one without the right tools. I never felt stupid about it. The game never made me feel stupid, I should say. When you solved them, you felt like you'd achieve something and you move on to the next one. And it was always the right amount of gameplay. And that's what was so good about it. They had a very specific look, and you'd enter one and it would tell you what it is, it would give you a clue in the name, and you have to figure it out. And some of them I was just absolutely just enthralled by. I'd sit there for ages figuring them out, or some I'd crack straight away, and it was awesome to just do these miniature-like puzzles. Like a very miniature dungeon experience, but more so about the puzzle element rather than any combat, even though there are ones that are focused on that. And they were incredible, and just exploring and coming across them constantly and finding them, and then some of them being like puzzles to get to and some just being really obvious, and it was always fun to try and get to them. I will say towards the end of my play I got most of them. I did start looking them up, mostly how to get to them, because some of the overworld puzzles, while very clever, I just couldn't figure out. I like doing them. I think they're one of my favourite bits of the game. It mixes up that perfect gameplay of running around Hyrule versus these small compact puzzles that you can enjoy, and even if you can't do them, you can just go away and come back because they become fast travel points. So you can go away and come back. I had to do that with some where a lot of the combat ones I wasn't well equipped enough, or I didn't have enough hearts and things like that, and then I come back to them later and I smash them because I was like, I'm much better leveled now. Also within the world you have landmarks that you can go and find. You've got the Korok seeds, you can also do, there's loads of side quests that you can come across. But the other thing I really want to talk about with the exploration side is the towers, and what the towers basically let you do. Is in this game you have a map, that each tower is in a different region. Currently when you start off, your map is blank, and each time you go to a tower it fills in that area. What's nice about it is it literally just becomes the map showing you what the landscape's like. It'll tell you the names of places, but it doesn't overwhelm you. It's not suddenly like, here's a bunch of seeds that you need to go find, or a bunch of shrines or whatever. That stuff appears on your map when you do it, when you find it. And I really appreciated that, because rather than keep me in an area constantly, I'd go to a tower, I would unlock the area, then I could stand on top of the tower, look around, I'd see a shrine, I'd fly to it or whatever. I think if I'd gone to a tower and then it had shown me where everything was, I would have spent so much time in that area rather than rushing off to different towers or exploring more of the land in my own natural way of doing things. And I really appreciated that. Other games, open world games, do, like Far Cry, do give you an area and show you the things that are there, which is, you know, some direction that people want, but I actually appreciated not having that direction. The game tells you about things and you learn through dialogue, and you've got like notes and things kept in your quest log, and everything is always there. It's fairly easy to find if you want it or you go after things, but the game, when you uncover the map, does not give you everything, does not show you everything. You exploring locations and finding stables and towns, it doesn't show you that until you find them personally, and I think that's really, really integral to the game. Yeah, now you've got a map, you can see that this is a mountain area, but now you need to go and find the stuff that's hidden in this mountain area or this in plain sight. And that was something that I very much enjoyed doing, getting to the towers, uncovering the map and seeing the map in all its glory, and seeing the landscape and how that was composed. Another thing that's really nice with the exploration is your choice of mobility. In this game you can run, you can glide, you can surf, and you can horseback. That's the main ways to get around. So you have a stamina bar which you can upgrade, and that allows you to run around a lot, that allows you to climb, so you can explore pretty much anywhere, which is great. You can do all that. If you look at a mountain or something, you can figure a way around it, or same with anything else like a bridge, something like that. But yes, you also have the paraglider, which is absolutely essential to this game, and it's something that I think really, without that itself, would make this game very different. Because you can fly from high places and around the map, because you can get high up on ridges and jump off to another mountain and things, it gives you this freedom to like just see the world in all its glory. You can fly towards one thing, suddenly see something else, and veer off the other way. It was such a smart decision to put this in the game, and the amount of times I've just gone up somewhere high and just jumped off and flown somewhere just out of sheer joy, and like the fact that you can glide down and ambush people, or you can get on a horse and things. It was just a lot of fun, this mechanic. A very simple mechanic of just jumping and gliding, but it really added to the game and allowed me to, when I climb a tower, for example, I can see the world, and I can just jump off the tower and fly in the direction I want to, and cover quite a lot of ground in a very short period of time. The surfing is something that I think was maybe a bit unnecessary, but I think as a mechanic I love it. I think it's so cool. You can shield surf. You can basically jump on your shield and slide down a hill to get down the hills quicker, and you can combine this with gliding, so you can jump, slide, jump off a thing, glide a little bit longer, land back on the ground and carry on surfing, and I think it was incredible. It was such a lot of fun. It does damage your shield. The fact that it's just really fun element to the game that doesn't necessarily have to be there. It doesn't feel out of place either. It feels very natural. The fact that you can just be like, I'm just going to jump on my shield and just get down this hill quicker or whatever. And it's a good way to escape enemies as well. It's a really nice mechanic that works really well in my opinion. Feels decent. You don't use it that often, but when you do use it, like, it just works. It flows beautifully into the gameplay. The other thing is horseback. Horses in this game, you know, their own characters. You have to go out and find a horse in the wild, tame the horse, take it to a stable, make it yours. And each one has different temperaments and things like that. And they're your own characters. These are people you can bond with your horse so that he becomes more controllable as the game goes on. And I have a few different ones in my game, and I don't use them a huge amount personally, but I love the fact that you can use your horse to get around. You can have these open horseback fights. You can do so much with the horse, and in terms of mobility, you can get around pretty fast with the horse. You can let the horse just go on autopilot, and you can just look around and enjoy the scenery and just enjoy everything in its glory, and that's wonderful being able to do that. That's mostly everything for the exploration side of things. I'm sure, like I said, I probably missed some things out, but for me, those were the points that really got me absorbed into the world, what I wanted to do, and it was fantastic. So I'm going to move on to combat now, and combat in this game is interesting. In some ways, it's a bit more simplified. In other ways, it's more complex. So if you've played previous 3D Zelda games, you usually are able to swing the sword in the direction, stab, backflip, ground stab. You have more control over that. In this game, you have a variety of different weapons. You use these weapons differently, but you're also kind of limited to the same sort of attacks. But then you also have the dodging mechanic, which works a very specific way. It works very well together, even if it feels like you're just hitting a button sometimes. So if you take a sword, a normal sword like Link would have in another Zelda game, you can swing it in a few different ways. It does a combo attack. You can jump and slash, and you can also hold the button down and do like a spin attack. That's the majority of ways that you can attack. Because the combat for Link and the combat of the AI are different in this game, but they work very well together. So in my opinion, I've had some incredible combat experience with the AI, because the AI, to me, I've not experienced anything bad thing, has been very clever. If I'm fighting someone with a shield and I'm wailing on him, he'll stand there with a shield up and counter-attack. If someone's got a spear, he'll keep himself at distance. If I'm surrounded by a group of things, they attack individually at their own time. And the amount of times I'll be in the middle of a fight and the AI would do things, sometimes would just do things that I wasn't expecting. It was a very, very good experience. You could almost say it's like a Dark Souls light. The combat in Dark Souls is very complex to the point that if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get destroyed. But it's also simple in the fact that if you learn the enemy attack patterns, you know what your stamina's like, and you can easily fight them off. So it's one of those easy to learn, hard to master things maybe. And with Zelda it's a bit similar. Because you have ways to dodge and deflect attacks, it's all about learning what the enemy does. But it depends on what weapon they have. So you have sword weapons, you have broadswords, sorry, not broadswords, two-handed swords. You have axes, and you also have sort of stabby weapons like a poleaxe. So you have like basically 4 categories: short swords, long swords, axes, and clubs, and then stabby weapons like a poleaxe. And they all handle differently. And when you come up against these in the world, it's amazing like how much you actually have to learn first, because some enemies have a huge reach on you. Some have to get up much closer. Some can punish you very quickly and kill you very quickly. Others take a bit longer. And even enemies with bows, they're very, very, very accurate. So it's a very good combination of combat. I felt like when I was in a combat situation, especially early on, I felt like I'd get destroyed a lot. So I would think about what I was going to do when I was getting into those situations. Luckily, the game, depending on where you go, the game scales the enemies appropriately, because late game enemies are very powerful and they will hit you very hard. And the combat just feels very satisfying, because I can enter a combat situation, chuck a bomb in the middle of the enemies, blow them all up and scatter them and then just work my way around while they're all figuring out what's going on. And that's incredibly satisfying. I can do other things. I don't want to spoil too much, but you can use the environment a lot more in this game to help you defeat groups of enemies. You can sneakily go around and steal all their weapons so they can only chuck rocks and hit you with their feet or fists. Like, you have so many different ways to deal with the enemies that you come across. You can use your bow. Your bow has different types of arrows. You can use those to sort out the combat situation if you want to fight from afar. And then each enemy will try to avoid these things you do. You chuck a bomb at an enemy and they'll try and run around it. Sometimes they'll chuck it back at you. You try to get your bow out, some of them try to side strafe so that you can't hit them. It's like, the entire time I was doing the combat sections, I never got frustrated. I knew I was going to die a lot from the start. I knew this game was hard. But even when I come across a very specific enemy, like about 3-4 hours in, I needed to beat this enemy to do a very specific thing in the game. And I had a blast because I figured out his pattern. I got really good at the dodging mechanic, and I was enjoying every second of it. And when I get him right down and he killed me, I wasn't frustrated. I was like, that was cool. I want to do that again. And I was just enjoying constantly fighting these enemies. I went away at one point, got a better weapon, came back and destroyed it. And the combat just feels so satisfying when you nail it. There is the issue with durability on the weapon. Sometimes in the middle of combat you got to hit something and your weapon breaks, and that is a pain in the ass. That wasn't a huge issue for me. I'll get onto more of that later, but it wasn't a huge issue for me while I was playing the game. Okay, so I want to talk about, I've talked about combat and how much I enjoyed that. I want to talk a bit more about the shrines, dungeons and puzzles in the game. I've spoken about the shrines and how much I enjoyed those and the puzzle elements in it. Those, like I said in the game, were some of my favourite bits. The dungeons, I'm not going to say what they were, but the dungeons in this game felt, again, very different to dungeons in previous Zelda games. Because you don't go into a dungeon in this game to find a specific item to then use that on the boss. They've made these in very creative ways in terms of each dungeon has a gimmick, and they're all the same in terms of what you have to do, but they all use a different gimmick. And it's all about you figuring it out how to do, while using this gimmick, how to complete the dungeon to get to the boss. The first dungeon I did, I took me a long time. 2 of the 4 of them I got through relatively quickly, but the other 2 I found a bit more challenging. But I still enjoyed them. I think I preferred the puzzles in the shrines, but I still liked what the dungeons did. I thought they were very original. I thought they were very clever. One of them was a bit weaker than the other 3, but I still enjoyed them. And I like the fact that I went into that dungeon with all the equipment I needed. There's nothing in that dungeon that I had to get specifically to complete it. And that's really cool, actually, because then again, there were experiences in that I had, that Mark had different ones where I would figure out things differently. He was doing one of the dungeons and he got to an area and I was like, how did you manage that? Like, what are you doing? But he done it differently. Whereas, I figured out, I think, the correct way. But then who's to say my way was the correct way? I just did it, I think, the way the game was showing me, whereas Mark saw it in a different way. He did it and jumped into this area, and I was like, what are you doing? But it still worked out. It worked out that was the right thing that he wanted to do, and it was fun to see that. And that was what's cool about the dungeons, seeing and tackle that. The boss fights in the dungeons, are interesting, because again, you're not using a singular weapon. In previous Zelda games that you use everything you have, your own tools to defeat the bosses in this. And the difference between me doing the first dungeon versus the second dungeon, I had 3 hearts. It was very difficult, but I enjoyed it, whereas later on I had more like 10 hearts or 8 or 9 hearts when I took on the second boss. Found it a bit easier, and that was personal choice. I had that many hearts because I chose that to do that. But I like the fact that, again, with the bosses, you can kind of learn them, you can understand them, and then they're creative, they're fun to go against. The first one was only difficult until I realised that there were things I could do to make it easier, and that's kind of what's cool about the game, is you can make things easier or harder for yourself depending on if you know about stuff, and even if you don't. If you've gone into a place much earlier on in the game, much later on in the game, the choice is, like I said before, the choice is completely up to you, and that's what makes them fun. That's about it for like I said, the dungeon, shrines and puzzles. Like I said, last thing on puzzles is the puzzles were great in this game and I love them. But I want to move on to story and characters, and no, I'm not going to spoil things. I just want to talk about generally what I liked about the story, in terms of that it isn't it has a linear story, but you don't have to tackle it in a linear way, and that was cool. Being able to do what I wanted to, experience the parts of the story when I wanted to, and it all kind of came together at the end. So when you start the game, you have a bit of a story. When you end the game, you have a story, and in the middle of that, you can choose to find out as much story as you want or as little story as you want. And the fact that the game does that was cool. I mean, maybe the story feels a bit looser because of that, but I enjoyed the fact that I could go and find story elements, find out what was going on about that. And that kind of brings me on to some of the character of Link. First off, is you're playing as Link as someone who's already seen this world, and this is someone who isn't a newbie starting off with his sword and his shield going off. He's not a young kid or anything. He is a knight in this game, and it's cool seeing the story from his past and learning about that, while also learning about these new experiences and adventures while you're going on it. And I actually really like Link in this game. I know that some people still think he's a bit, he's a little bit bland, but I like the fact that Link is the character you project onto. But I also like that he does feel like he's got a lot of character in this game, and he knows what his role is to play, and he's very good at it. And that's why when you start the game, you feel like it's combat prowess, but as you go on, you feel like a real badass because you've got this cool armor, these cool weapons. You're taking on much tougher enemies, and when you succeed, you're just like, yeah, this is Link. This is how he's so cool in this game, and I loved him for that. Yeah, the other thing that's nice about the story and characters is the voice acting. It's interesting how they choose to do it. Characters only seem to be voice acted mainly in the cutscenes, but all the right characters are voiced. I think a lot of the major characters you run into in this game are very cool. There's a couple maybe that feel a bit flat with their voices, but it's fun. I think the characters sound decent. I got invested into them. I think Zelda sounds really good. I know she's got a very typical posh English accent, but what you learn about her is fun. The other characters you meet, they're cool, and I like it. And it's weird to think there's voice acting in the game. Maybe next time they go a bit more out with it, so that they're voice acted outside of cutscenes. That would be cool. But it definitely added to the experience. I wasn't disappointed with the voice acting. I just enjoyed the characters. Maybe the writing at some points a little bit weak, but for the most part, I enjoyed what they had to watching the cutscenes and what they were saying and them talking to Link, and it was good, and I enjoyed it, and I hope that they continue to do that with the Zelda series. Alright, another thing I want to move on to is the music. The music in this game is phenomenal. Unlike previous Zelda games that you go to an area, a piece of music plays, it's very obvious where you are, you know it. This game has that, but it also uses the music in a much more creative way. The music is used as an indicator to what's going on around you. So there's a day-night cycle. When you're out in an area and the sun's out in the game, you hear this bit of music, it's piano music, to tell you sort of like it's daytime, it's calm, it's safe, it subtly is plonking along while whatever you're doing. Then when it's night, you get a different bit of music. It gives it a bit more creepy. It's kind of like, oh, it's a bit dangerous to be out. But then you also get music for when combat starts. Certain types of enemies that are around, certain types of bosses. If you're in a cold place, if you're in a hot place, if you're... Basically, the game consistently tells you, not just through visuals, but through the sound... Visuals, but through the sound and the audio, the music, sorry. And you are constantly noted of like what's going on. But there are areas that you get to, and the music plays, and it is serene, it's beautiful, and there's some tunes in this game that things you expect from Zelda that you hear, and these themes, and it's great hearing them come through. I think overall the soundtrack, the fact that the soundtrack was so good really added to my experience. Some of my favourite music was the shrine music. If you go away and just look that up, just look for Zelda Breath of the Wild shrine music, there are a few different variations on it, but it reminded me of some of the old cave music from Link's Awakening. Like, it's almost like elements of that in there, but it was very calm, very peaceful, with this kind of like technological look and this music playing. It was incredible, and it was some of my favourite music from the entire game, and I loved it. I think that it's definitely one of my favourite soundtracks from a Zelda game, even though I love a lot of the classic tunes, and it would be cool to hear some more of those. There was one point when I ran into a song I wasn't expecting to hear, and I just like this giant smile across my face, and I just stopped and looked around while I was enjoying the music, and I think it was done so perfectly well, because I had no idea what to expect from this soundtrack going into this game. I mean, I'd heard bits that it was quite minimalistic in places, but then I'd run into a boss, and the boss would have certain type of music, and I was like, oh, this is so cool, this has got me pumped up for the boss, and it just did such a good way of incorporating that soundtrack. So well done to the composers on that front. A little bit about questing. Questing in this game is, like I said, is kind of your freedom, and it's great. Like, you get pointers on the map, it's very subtle. You talk to someone, they go, I want you to help me with this, you can help them like that, you get small rewards, or you can do the large quests, they show you where you need to go. The questing's just done in such a simple way, and it works. you know, like your main quest, your side quests, shrine quests, and everything. And I've still got tons of side quests I want to do just lined up. I collected so many quests and just left them. I spent more time not doing quests than doing them. You know, again, I did it when I wanted to do it. I was like, oh, cool, there's a quest in this area, like there, just fast travel back and do the quest, and it was great. It was just such a nice, simple system. It works very, very clean. There's nothing more to say about it. It was just very clean and worked very well. I mentioned the boss fights in the dungeons, but there are, like I said, there are boss fights out in the world, or mini-bosses. And it's cool. You just stumble across them, and it's just like, each one has a different way of dealing with them. There's only a few variants. But, you know, in a certain area, you come across one type, and some only come out at night, you know, like, and you always get rewards for it. There's always good rewards. If you want, certain ones drop different things. If you go and find them, you know, you can find them and be like, this one gives me this one gives me this. And they were great. They were just so fun to just stumble across. And even with the main boss fights, the final boss fight, the boss fights in the dungeons, all that stuff, and even the fight combat, the sort of almost the combat in the shrines, the combat ones, so those which were even more like mini bosses. All of that just worked really well. One of the boss fights in one of the dungeons I loved. It was so all about timing. It was good fun. I felt like I was nailing it. And I think the boss fights, obviously, because you're not using a specific item and stuff like that, the boss fights feel a bit similar in terms of they have different abilities, but you're kind of just fighting, you know, a boss that you can wail on or whatever weapon you've got. But I still appreciated the fact that I had the option to tackle the boss however I wanted. In previous Zelda games, you know, like a Manhandler or Goma, all these very classic, iconic bosses, and, you know, you need a certain item to fight them, and people remember that. They probably won't remember many of the bosses in this game, I don't think, because they're all kind of similar. It didn't matter, I enjoyed them anyway, and I thought that was fun, and I liked the fact that I could just use a basic sword to wail on them. I didn't have to have an item that specifically targeted a specific point of a boss. So that was good. Something I want to go into a little bit of detail is the powers and abilities you get given in this game. These are fantastic. I don't want to go too much in what you get later on, but right off the bat you get given bombs, a magnetic ability, a frozen ice ability, and a stasis ability. You get this in the first hour of the game, in the first area, and these are the only abilities you ever really need in the game. There are optional things later on that you can get, other powers and things that you can get. I don't want to talk about too much, but they were really cool as well. You get stuff later on, and it turns out they were really useful and they helped a huge amount. But the stuff you get straight off the bat was so fun, and because the game doesn't have a linearity with it, and it gives you all of these abilities straight away, it makes doing everything like so much fun, because you can tackle things in a different way. Like I've been saying, you can do it the way you want to do it. You do a puzzle. I did a particular puzzle, and I did it one way. I watched Mark do it a completely different way. We had similar ideas, but it was great. It's so fun that those are there. Like there's always, your answer's always with you, basically. Whatever you come across, you've already got everything you need to do it, and that is some very clever and fantastic and very simple design, and I loved it. Another thing in this game that really made me smile was just how much sense a lot of things made. And what I mean by this is, you take a block of ice. If you've got a torch or you set up a fire, the block of ice melts. Now you think, oh, that's quite simple. You know, any game could do that. But it was constantly showing me things that you think about going, oh, that probably won't work. And actually it did. In this game you have weather. If you're wearing something, if you've got a weapon that's metal, it starts sparking. No, in a lightning area. You can chuck that weapon in the middle of a bunch of enemies, the lightning will hit it and set fire to everyone. Just things like that just were these little moments of where I was just like, this makes so much sense in like terms of a real world, and they nailed it with so many things. I don't want to spoil too much because I kept constantly coming across things throughout the game going, this, you know, in my head it made sense, but the game probably won't figure that out. You know, it won't accept that as a way of doing it, and it worked. And I was just like constantly surprised and just these big smiles on my face when I was like, wow, you know, any other games I've played that wouldn't have happened. But in this game, the fact that it did happen and it worked like that was just incredible. And that was a big selling point for me, and that's really why I enjoyed it. Really, that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about. I'm sure I've missed some things throughout this, but I'm hoping that you can see why this game turned me into such a big Zelda fan. I loved it. I mean, 70 hours, you know, and avoiding the final boss until sort of near the end of that. I can't really, you know, thank the developers of Nintendo for making a game as good as this. They did their job amazingly. Before I go though, I do want to hit home a few things about, you know, performance of this game, because it is slightly disappointing that this game doesn't run at 60 frames a second. For the most part, the issues that other people were having, which was frame rate issues, frame rate stutter, some slight freezing, and a few little glitches, I never had much of that, very little of it, and it never affected my gameplay. And because of that, my experience was I loved it. Now, I'm sure if I'd experienced more of this stuff, I would have been more frustrated. Only in the 70 hours I played, the game sort of froze about 3 times for about a second, and I never saw it again. There are times when you run out into an area and it does sort of, you can see the frame rate dip, and it is frustrating. The game it never got in the way of my fun and my experience and my gameplay. I wasn't in a situation where the frame rate would drop and I'd suddenly die, or it would completely ruin what I was doing. And the same with the glitches. I've only seen maybe one so far. I've seen very little glitches or anything like that, or any buggy things. Like, I know other people have experienced stuff, but me personally, I haven't. And I can't really speak to those things that much because it's not been an effect on my gameplay. I will say they have recently just patched it today, I believe, and it does help smooth out the frame rate issues. But, you know, the game isn't perfect in terms of running well. It could run better, but that never affected my experience. So that's what I wanted to say on that. You know, there are other little issues that people had with the weapon durability. I can understand why people found that frustrating. The blood moon ability, I haven't really spoke about that, but that resets the world every so often. This will happen. It will spawn on the enemy's back to keep it full. There's a few little mechanics and bits and bobs that I think people are now having issues with, but overall, for 70 plus hours gameplay, like, I had an incredible experience. This game has now become one of my top 5 games of all time. I never thought I'd put a Zelda game in my top 5. You know, I am a huge fan of the Mario Brothers series. I'm a huge fan of Smash Brothers. Like, these are the games that are there. But now this open world game has just given me pure joy, and I haven't played a game like this that's hooked me for so long in such a long time. And I'm very appreciative of it. And yeah, you know, you see all these reviews, people are giving it 10s out of 10s. It does deserve that. You know, it's not a perfect game by any means, like I said about the issues it's got. But I think a lot of people that are either Zelda fans or even people that aren't, you know, that have played it, just experienced this wonderful game that just brought me a lot of smiles, brought me a lot of joy. And I think that's why, you know, this game has become one of my favourite games. Maybe in 6 months' time when I play it again or something, I might be like, oh, actually, it's not as good. Maybe it's the fact that I played it to start with, but so far this game is not disappointing, and the 4 or 5 years it's taken to make it, you know, I can appreciate the effort that's gone into it. That's pretty much for me today. I just wanted to talk about how much I love this game and how much it's turned me into a fan. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble on. Hopefully I haven't spoiled too much. I tried to keep that to a minimum. But thank you very much for listening. I'll be back with the guys fairly soon, I'm sure. We've got new content coming to you. So take it easy. See you soon.